So let's take a look now at creating our own user variables and how we will work with these. Now, let me just say I'm going to introduce this slowly. There is a lot more to this than just the concept of, hey, here's what a variable is and here's how to populate it. Okay, it's going to take a lot more than just that. We're going to have to talk about scoping. We've got to talk about how each of the different tasks or transformations can take advantage of those. So kind of bear with me. I'm not going to go fast because I want to make sure you have a really good understanding of this. So I'm back over here in my package. Okay? And it's a bunch of stuff over here. I'm not going to show you that. I'm going to show you this. So I click on my little new button, right? So if you don't see your variables, if it's not here, none of that's here, we can go up here to the top. We can go find our variables. It's under other windows over here. I will say that I've had some difficulty sometimes getting the variables window to pop up, and that my most consistent way of doing it is just finding some blank space and going to variables. That always works. Doing it in some other ways, I've seen some bugs. Okay, so remember we're taking a look at the system variables. So you may not want to see those. Those are turned off by default. And so you click the little new guy here. This guy, where'd you go, right? Sorry. Oops, I don't even know what I just did. This the guy we click. So I click new. It pre-fills in a name called variable. We're going to talk about scoping here in a little bit, but we're going to talk specifically in this video about the data types and values and how to create our variables. Okay? So the first thing that you should know, and it's incredibly important, is that variable names are case sensitive. That means that when you design and work with tasks later on that are going to be working with these variables, if you have to type the variable name in, make sure you get it right. Very, very important. Okay? So another thing is that variables have a single data type, and this is seen in this data type column, and variables have a value. Okay? So we can see them here. I'm gonna leave the scope concept alone for just a minute. In a couple of videos, I've got a whole video that describes scoping and kind of gives you some best practices and tips for that. Okay, so a variable is just a horrible name. So usually you want your variable's name to somehow describe its use and or the type of data that it stores. So I might number of rows. Okay. Well, when I see number of, then it's probably going to be some type of an integer. And you can see that we're really mapping over here to the .NET data types here, the Boolean, the byte, the char, char. I've heard that pronounced every possible way, I think. The date time, the DB null, scrolling down to int32, int64, the object data type, single byte, single string, unsigned integer 64. So if the number of rows is going to fit in between -2 billion and +2 billion, I can choose int32. Now, sometimes when I come over here, I can put in a value and I can give it a default value. Other times I can leave it blank. However, if you're dealing with a numeric right here, you must provide some sort of a default value, because if you do not, you're going to get this index was outside the bounds of the array error message. Don't you think they could have actually written that to be a little more friendly? Hey, you forgot to initialize this as 0. Would you like us to automatically initialize it to 0 for you? That kind of thing would have been helpful. It has to be a number. Like, I can type in whatever I want, but now I'm going to get input string was not in the correct format, because it's not that type of a data type, right? So I need to put some type of a number. It defaults to 0, and then I can move off the row and work with it. So what I'm putting in for this value initially starts out what the starting value is of this particular row. Okay? So notice that. Think back. Earlier in chapter 4, I showed you how to use a fake destination, a faux destination, a trash destination. And if you remember what I told you, I said that the easiest way to create a fake destination is to use in your data flow task to grab, let me pull up my toolbox here. Where's my toolbox? And I wanted to grab a row count. So the row count transform will now store its values in an integer-based variable. So you notice in this drop-down, these are all of the variables. And you can see that it has this odd syntax. The type system, colon, colon, name. And then remember the names are case sensitive. So you don't have to actually choose it. You could, if you knew what it was, number of rows maybe. You could actually just type it in. I think that's what it was. Now don't forget that these names are also case sensitive. So you can actually type them in using that. This was a user variable, colon, colon. I think it was number of rows. I don't know, but we did actually get it right, thankfully. So it picked it up. It's probably just easier to drop it down and choose it. The one thing I wish is that this would exclude read-only variables. Like I cannot assign it to the task ID. You see, I'm not allowed. As soon as I try, I can't do it. So it's a little bit of an oversight there, I think, of the SSIS design team. Hopefully in a future version that would be a little cleaner there. But so now we've populated, or we will populate after reading the source, the value of our variable. And so how do we see the value of the variable? Remember, we can come over here, and here's the variables window. And when I double clicked it, it undocked it. So I need to, if I want, I can dock it again, or I can bring it over here as a tab like it originally was. Double click here and it will auto width those. So we can see what the value of that is. Okay. Now, I am going to do something that I'm not really going to show you how to do or why I'm doing it right now. So close your eyes real quick. Don't watch. This is super secret ninja SSIS stuff here. You shouldn't be looking. I know it's tempting. Don't bother. I'll show you that. I'm going to show you this like in the next video, I think, in one of the next videos here. So here's what I'm going to do. Shh, don't look. Oh man, what was it? Number of rows. And okay. So here's what we'll do. I'm going to run that. I'm going to populate with the data flow task, and then I'm going to view with the script task. Okay? So I hit F5, cranks it up, and we get our little pop-up to see that 13 rows had been processed. Okay? So we go back over here, we take a look at the variables, we hit the save button. Not a whole lot to it. It's a fine way to assign and design and work with variables, right? Pretty easy to do. That's kind of the basics. Now let's just talk quickly about the data type usage here. I think most of these will be familiar to people that have worked with data types, true, false here, single character data, date, time data, double precision floating point, double byte integers, 4-byte integers. Coming down here, do that one more time, sorry. And here, so this is 8-byte integers. I'm going to leave the object alone right now for the time being here. Strings, you're going to have a lot of string usage here. you're probably going to find that you use a small number of these on a day-to-day basis. Okay? Now, let's get to that object one. In .NET, most things are objects. So most things in .NET are stored as actual objects. You can create an object from nearly every class in the .NET framework. I know some people purport that everything in .NET derives from system.object. That's not necessarily true. Don't fall into that myth. So just saying most things derive from system.object. So you could actually use the object data type as a type of storage that says, you know what, I don't know what type of object that I'm going to store in here. It might be a value type, might be a reference type. It's going to actually store it as a reference type if you use the object variable here. We can store actual objects, actual .NET objects here. So we could source an object of the stopwatch class, for example, to do a timer. I'm going to show you how to do all this kind of stuff with it. But the object class, you can deal with any type of data with the object class. Now, more specifically, we're going to use this to marshal different objects between tasks. So we might, at the beginning of our SSIS package, we might instantiate a stopwatch, and we might place that object inside of an SSIS variable of type object. And then later on in another task, we might stop the stopwatch. And then in another task, we might read how many elapsed milliseconds occurred. So we're basically using that as temporary storage. It's a variable. And it's storing actual .NET objects instead of just data like the number 4, for example. So we're going to do this. We're going to store result sets in the object data type. We're going to create .NET objects and store them there. We're going to play around with that one quite a bit. Now, next up, I'm going to go ahead and end this one here because I want to show you how you can get and set the values of your SSIS variables using the script task. And I want to show you what I just did, which was make this little silly little pop-up that tells us that there were 13 rows processed. This is not something you'll ever do in a production level package, but it's really handy to have in your arsenal when you're doing development. So I'll see you in the next video and I'll show you what I did.